So hello, welcome to the video and welcome to a rather dodgy motel close to JFK Airport. Not my usual backdrop, but I have an overnight here, a few hours to kill, so I thought I'd get this video recorded. I lived in the United States for about 6 years and I always enjoy coming back for a visit. But one aspect of any visit that I really don't enjoy is queuing up at immigration to be let in. The Statue of Liberty exhorts to other countries to give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. And I sometimes wonder whether the US government's ambition when it designed the current immigration process was to echo that sentiment. Even if your airline deposits you at the border in great shape, most people will be tired and huddled together if they have to stand in line for 2 hours to get to a desk. But there is a solution, a fast track to US immigration called global entry. You apply, you're screened, and if you aren't deemed a risk to the US government and you are prepared to pay a relatively modest fee, you get a magic number which entitles you to jump the queue at immigration and be through in a matter of minutes. Now, I've known about this opportunity for some time, but I never really felt that my travel plans included enough visits to the United States to make it worthwhile. And I've also in the past deployed some ways of minimising the immigration pain. A number of overseas ports have a US presence where immigration formalities are completed before you even set foot on the plane to take you to America, which means you arrive as a cleared passenger as if it were a domestic flight. I've taken that option before in Dublin, Toronto and Nassau, as well as in Shannon when I was lucky enough to take British Airways Baby Bus across to New York. But now I have YouTube channels about flying and cruising, I expect to be visiting the United States more frequently. So I decided to take a closer look. And I quickly realised that as well as saving me quite a lot of time when I arrive at the border, it might also make for quite an interesting video. So I decided to go for it. And I was accepted, and now I have it, I just used it, and it is wonderful. So in this video I'll explain the process, I'll show how I navigated through it, and most importantly I'll share how long it took. So if that sounds good, stick around! Hi, I'm Matt. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.4 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe and you might pick up some hacks, hints and tips to make your next trip better. Now, global entry is available to US and Canadian citizens as well as to citizens of 14 other countries. A slightly eclectic mix of friendly European, Asian, Central and South American countries, plus slightly randomly Bahrain. And here's a list of things that will make you ineligible for the scheme. If any of these apply, I am pretty confident that the US government will figure it out. So I really wouldn't advise applying in the hope that something lurking in your past doesn't come out. I have a British passport, so for me it was a 3-stage process. The first, which doesn't apply to US applicants, is to complete a vetting process from the UK government. This involves filling in an online form, paying £42 and waiting. That form can be found on the uk.gov website and I'll include links to it plus everything else I talk about in the description below. There are 9 sections to complete and as you can see it's all really quite straightforward. And I'll stress again, I really don't think this is a process where you should try your luck if you have something lurking in your past. I've speeded this all up a little bit, but without the edits it took me 1 minute and 14 seconds to complete this form. But it only took me that long because for some reason I am completely incapable of memorising my 9-digit passport number. And that passport was the only physical document I needed to refer to in this part of the process. So the government then took my £42, you're very welcome Jeremy Hunt, and I sat back to wait out the 10 working days I was advised it would take for the clearance to come through. And 14 hours later I got an email confirming that I had passed whatever checks had been performed. I'm going to speculate that the ability to pay £42 was the most significant check that was undertaken, but maybe I'm just being cynical. I'm sure the UK government's computers can run an awful lot of cross-checks in 14 hours. That then gave me a UK government access code, which is what I needed on the Customs and Border Protection website to get cracking with stage 2. This is a slightly more involved process than the UK government's questions had been, but even so, it still only took me about 20 minutes to complete. And I wasn't at all prepared to complete this. You, with the benefit of this video and having the documents to hand, should be able to do it much, much quicker. First, you have to create an account with the US government. About 5 of the 20 minutes of this process was spent waiting for that confirmation email to come through, and to come up with a password that was complex enough to meet their security requirements. Joking aside, we are talking about US national security here, and they are taking it very, very seriously. And they do require an additional level of security above and beyond a password. Now, my computer has got a fingerprint keypad, which was satisfactory for them, and I think most devices these days have either a fingerprint or a face recognition system to allow an additional layer of security to be confirmed in this application process. And I went belt and braces and got a series of backup codes as well. Never had to use them, but it is an extra level of security that is required of you. So once your account is live and active, it's time for your personal data. Nothing extraordinary required here. And this is where I needed my UK verification code, which was validated, and I was able to move on. Once again, there are 9 stages, and stage 1 is identifying features. I'm 6'3½", but I decided to round down. Then passport data is sought. Your global entry will synchronise with your birth date, but there is a facility to put new passport details in if your primary passport does change during the life of your global entry. An important point to note here is that you will still need an ESTA or some other visa to enter the United States. Global entry will get you out of the airport quicker, but you won't be able to get on your plane without an ESTA. Then it asks for my driving licence info, and I think this portal is also used for a separate scheme which allows you to fast track your way over the Mexican border if you have a vehicle. Next is address info. I ended up with a big red cross here, but I'll come back to that later. Then employment details. Now, I operate my businesses through a company of which I am an employee, so this was easy enough for me because I've been doing that for more than 5 years. And that gave me a green tick because I only have had one job in the last 5 years, but you'll need your employment history going back 5 years if you have moved around. Next is countries visited in the last 5 years. I'm not going to speculate on why they ask for this. Oh, no, wait, yes, I am. There's a list of countries which, if you have visited them since 2011, makes you ineligible for an ESTA. That list is North Korea, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan and Yemen. Now, President Trump also declared Cuba to be a state sponsor of terrorism as one of his last acts as president, and I won't speculate on why he did that. So Cuba is also now on that list, but only for visits since 2021. Now, you can still visit the United States if you have visited one or more of those countries, but you will need to apply for a visa, and the waiting time to get an appointment for a visa interview at the moment is lengthy. So I suspect this section of the application is an opportunity that the US government is taking to try and truffle out of applicants whether there may be any countries they visited who are on the naughty step. Section 8 is standard questions about previous wrongdoings. And then I had to go back to section 5 as you need a full residential address history going back 5 years. I thought the application process was actually really quite good. It was quite straightforward and very user-friendly. Then an opportunity to review everything, and it's time to pay the $100 fee. So if you want to prepare yourself in order to be able to complete this quicker than the 20 minutes it took me, you'll need your passport, your driving licence, employment, residential and travel history going back 5 years. And if you have all that, I reckon you could crack through this in about 10 minutes. And then you wait, and it was a proper wait this time, none of that 14-hour nonsense. When I applied, the website warned that it could take up to 90 days for provisional approval to come through. I checked after 90 days and that had been updated to say that it could take anywhere from 6 to 18 months for approval to come through now. But in the end, 153 days, so just over 5 months later, I got an email confirming I had been conditionally approved. So on to stage 3, which is to attend an interview with the CBP, at which time your biometrics will be taken and you'll have the opportunity to discuss things with an actual physical border agent. Now you can make an appointment to visit an airport to do this, and if you live in America that's probably the most logical way to do it. But appointments seem to be really hard to come by, and you may end up with a lengthy wait, perhaps even months. But a far better option is to ask for an interview when you are being screened for entry into the United States the next time you arrive. If you live outside the US, that's obviously quite a logical way of doing it. But even if you live in the United States, buying a cheap ticket to somewhere in Canada or Mexico to create an entry back into the United States would seem like the way to go. Now, I wasn't all that excited about having to perk myself up for what I thought might be a demanding interview with an immigration officer after getting off a long-haul flight. But as luck would have it, my conditional approval came through when I was already travelling, and it came through 2 days before I was scheduled to fly from Bonaire to Miami. So I was able to have my interview only 2 days after I received conditional approval, and I was able to do it after a relatively short flight. And straight after that interview, I captured its salient points in this video. So the one thing that I didn't actually know, that I had researched quite hard to try and find an answer to, is actually how to trigger the global entry interview. Do you go through the global entry channel, get to the machines, and then someone magically whisks you off to the interview, or do you have to go through the usual immigration process and then ask for one when you reach the counter? Well, unfortunately, the answer is that it was the latter. I needed to queue up, as the normal people do, to get to the counter before I could start the process. Miami Airport took about 30 minutes. Could have been better, could have been worse. I've had better and I've had worse, but it is what it is. And when I got to the counter, I simply said to the guy, I've been approved for my global entry. I would like an interview, please. He reconfirmed with me that I'd received an email confirming that my conditional approval had been received. I said it had, and it was quite interesting because he then asked me no questions about the purpose of my visit or how long I was staying or any of the usual things that you experience when you're trying to enter the United States. Instead, he peeled a big red sticker off a little pack of them that were pre-printed, whacked it on my passport, wrote global on it, put my passport to one side, asked me to step back and wait, which I duly did, even if it messed up the queuing process somewhat to have this big oaf standing in the middle of all of these people trying to get to the counter. So about 5 minutes passed, and a slightly stressed looking fellow slowly made his way down the counters, picking up all the waifs and strays like me who needed to go on for secondary processing. I think I was the only one to have a global entry interview to go to. The other 5 or 6 people in my little group seemed to have various other reasons that they needed to be secondarily screened. One woman seemed to have a dog down her shirt, which was very strange. Don't know whether that triggered the need for closer inspection. But anyway, once he'd gathered this half dozen or so of us, he took us through a mystery unmarked door into the inner sanctum of the border security team at Miami Airport. Now, as I was the global entry interviewee, he told me to go through the first room into the second room, sit down and wait there. The other 5 people were kept in that first room, presumably for more thorough investigation. The second room I went to had seats for probably 50 people or so, and there were maybe 6, 7 or 8 people already waiting when I got there. So I sat down and I waited. There was a very strict no phone rule, and some of the younger folks, who obviously immediately pulled out their phone, were barked at quite sharply by passing officers for using their phones. But fortunately, I am old school in some regards, so I was able to pull out my Economist magazine and read that. So it seemed that there were 2 guys conducting the interviews. Names were called out and people went off with them for probably 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes on average. Took a while, but after about 40 minutes of waiting, it was my turn, and I went through. Well, it wasn't an unmarked door this time. It was very heavily marked with do not enter signs, but nevertheless I went through it into a small room out back, the inner sanctum of the border security team at Miami Airport, no doubt. And the guy sat me down, and I was prepared to be asked some of the questions that had been on the form, maybe a little bit of an interrogation. Why was I interested in coming to the United States? But no, he asked me 4 things. He asked me my full name, he asked me my birth date, he asked me the email address with which I'd made the application, all pieces of information that I had readily to hand. And the 4th question was whether I was entering that day on an ESTA or on a green card. I said ESTA. He clacked away at his screen, said, oh yeah, okay. He then proceeded to click things, couldn't see because the screen was facing him, but he proceeded to click things 20, 25, maybe 30 times, not saying anything to me. And he got to the end and said, right, all sorted. He took my photograph, he took 10 of my fingerprints and said, it's all approved. I had my driving license out with proof of address, which I believed was required. I'd also seen a video where somebody had been asked to go back through all the countries they'd visited in the last 5 years. Nothing like that at all for me. Very, very quick and simple process. 3, maybe 4 minutes, the vast majority of which was the guy clicking various things on his screen. He wrote down a number on a little flyer giving you information about the process, and said in the next 24 hours I will receive an email with final confirmation. So that was the process. It was very straightforward. It took probably 1 hour and 20 minutes in total from joining the immigration queue to coming out the far end. Wasn't the most fun I've ever had, and the facilities that they use aren't perhaps the best face that Miami Airport can offer, but it was done, and that now will last me for 5 years. So I really needn't have worried about that interview. A lot of the heavy lifting has been done in the process of gaining conditional approval, so I don't think the interview is really there to try and catch you out. And it gives you an opportunity to ask questions of the officer too. I believe US citizens are then mailed a card which contains the magic number, but for the rest of us we have to make do with a confirmation email containing the number, which you then load into your flight reservation so that the number is held in the airline's system. And that goes in the trusted traveller number box on your flight booking. And one other benefit is that if you have global entry, you get TSA pre-clearance thrown in. I think this costs about 80 quid on its own, so it really is quite a nice little add-on. And that means you can use the fast track lane at the airport where you don't need to remove your liquids from your bag. I think you can leave your shoes on, and there's a couple of other benefits that really do speed that security process. And again, you add your trusted traveller number to your booking and you should get a TSA pre-flag printed on your boarding pass, which is what you need to gain access to that lane. So it took me 155 days from start to finish. It cost me the £42 plus the $100. And although I was a wee bit apprehensive about the interview, I really needn't have been. And as I record this from my hotel close to JFK Airport, I just used global entry to enter the country, and it was fantastic. I did actually video the experience, but there are massive signs up saying you shouldn't be videoing stuff, so I won't include it in this video. But I essentially put my passport into an automated reader, allowed the machine to capture an image of my face, it beeped, printed off a little receipt, which I then took to the agent standing at the end of the chute for global entry applicants. He looked at it, asked me if I had anything I needed to declare for customs. I said no, and I was through. There were 4 or 5 people ahead of me at the inspection point with the agent, so it did take probably 2 minutes in total, but it was really, really brilliant. So there you go. I hope this was useful. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that suggestion that this process might now take 18 months proves to not be true. Thanks again for watching. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment as well. Are you considering global entry, having listened to this? Please subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to support what I'm doing more directly, I have a Patreon account, the link to which is in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.